My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. So welcome back, David Yu.
Thanks for having me.
Most of you, if anybody hasn't seen the last podcast David was on, he's based over in Shanghai. He's one of the world's renowned leasing experts. He was founder of Lease Corp, or it was a Lease Corporation Inc., LCI Leasing. He's done work with family offices and has been investing in aircraft for the last 15 years, David? 20?
Yep.
And you just wrote a book. What's your new book is titled?
Aircraft Valuation, Airplane Investments as an Asset Class, by Paul Grave, published by Paul Grave Macmillan.
And David is also a professor of economics at New York University in Shanghai. So he brings a great background, and I love the conversations we always have because you look at things from a very different lens. And we were just talking about your op-ed for Asia's airlines. The financial strife is only beginning, so that's probably a good place to start. What's happening with the Asian airlines?
Sure, I think if you think about it, since COVID really kicked off here in Asia in January. And it didn't really kind of get spread out and really become prevalent in the West, in Western places I would say March timeframe. But look, it's been a severe battle, right? If you have all these airlines and you take away essentially a large chunk of their demand right off the bat, and your supply chains, your fixed costs are still at historical levels, you're not primed to be sustainable, period. So what you've seen in the last, 10 months, 11 months, you've seen basically recapitalization to its fullest, right, by everyone. You see that through state-owned, government subsidies, government kind of bailouts. You see it from the self-help aspects where the airlines have gone out and raised significant amount of debt, basically mortgaging all their assets that they have at its disposal. That's been primarily, I would say, actually on the North American carriers rather than the Asian carriers. Asian carriers, if you see it, there hasn't been as much wholesale debt raises as compared to their North American colleagues. But what else are you seeing? You're just seeing wholesale cost cutting, right? Furloughs, obviously, lots and lots of people made redundant, which is very unfortunate. And will have tons of repercussions going forward, especially from the pilot side and skilled labor side. This is in the next wave, this will definitely have huge repercussions. So from a financial point of view, where are the funding coming from? You need to really restructure the cost elements of capital structure in order to sustain what we have today. It's just way overkill at the moment. So it's going to have negative drag until things get restructured. And that's really kind of what I've been arguing, where you need to take the pain now so that you get into a better sustainable state. And then that way you can set yourself up for growth. If you kind of try to drag this out, it'll just be a much longer kind of painful duration. And at the same time, you might actually still get to the same place where you might have to restructure anyways. So that's kind of my viewpoint on that.
We were just talking about before we started hit record, we were just talking about Singapore Airlines and $13 billion from the government into Singapore. And they've already spent half of it. So they got $6.5 billion left. So what happens when that's gone? Does Singapore continue to throw more money into it? What about some of the airlines in China?
Well, look, I think Sorry about that. But yes, no. I think look, Singapore is obviously has a great brand and track record and track record of making money. What's happening today is they've been actually slower in terms of cutting costs compared to other carriers, and that's been reflected on their kind of cash burn. But one thing that it's out of their control is the fact that they're pretty much 100% international traffic, right?
Mhm.
Where other airlines at least have some domestic traffic to counterbalance it. And today we're still seeing international traffic in the low teens, 90% down range. And while domestically, if you have a big enough economy, then things are looking a bit better. Places like China, US should be better. Obviously there's been the COVID outbreak is still happening.
Mhm.
Europe and Australia, et cetera. They've seen generally domestic markets have generally performed better compared to international still. So this bit is a big drag. In terms of another government kind of slug, I would call it, of bailouts or equity or debt. I think it's going to be a difficult upswing. Why is that? Mainly because one, a lot of governments have already given significant aid to the airlines. Okay,
Mhm.
while it's big, the magnitude is generally not to the sum that would help significantly to most of the airlines, right? On a magnitude basis, but at the same time, there's so many other industries that's been affected, right? Think of just tourism,
Mhm.
hotels, retail, restaurants, etc. They've all, and countless others, and they've all
Everybody
been
wants
kind of affected.
everybody wants the money.
Exactly. So I can't see, and I can't see government saying, "Hey, we're going to give you round number two," while other people haven't even gotten round number one.
Right.
So that's kind of my thoughts there. And I would say the airline industry has done relatively well compared to other industries in that respects, where they have gotten money and support, where others have not in significant sums. So to China's point, so China has really been supporting the industry in different ways. Just so latest numbers, China's passenger numbers and passenger and traffic numbers have actually increased. So we are back to pre-COVID plus numbers. So that's
Wow.
domestically speaking. So this is great. And I would say from a subsidy or kind of a support basis, China has actually taken a very different kind of angle compared to the rest of the world, where there's been supporting actually the actual flying of routes and such, basically encouraging airlines to continue flying those routes and supporting them that way, rather than straight up debt or equity infusions. So those are kind of a different aspects. But look, one of the differences also is the fact that the economic labor force is very different, structurally compared to every country, right?
Mhm.
So some people are much more aggressive, and some people are very lean in what they can actually do. I mean, what the airlines can actually do. So this is quite a big difference, and that's actually kind of also reflective in the kind of cash burn of respective countries as well. So these are kind of data points or touch points that people should consider, not just looking at just pure headline numbers, but some other aspects as well.
Does Who survives? I mean, what's the new normal look like? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? I mean, you've got a lot of like Singapore, Qantas, big international carrier. They're hurting. You got some of the airlines out of Japan. Who wins? Who loses in the whole thing?
Look, I wish everyone had a pure crystal ball, but all we can say is different possibilities at this point, right? So one possibility, one scenario, which I think has been quite likely, is who is the most support in terms of their capital and capital structure. And I would call those national flag carriers as well as state-owned carriers, being backed by the state.
Mhm.
That being said, those guys, if you think about it, would have the firepower potentially to go out and and actually do M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and consolidation in light of difficulties by other airlines.
Right.
I think those guys would do relatively well comparatively. Also, people who have a domestic market, countries that have larger domestic markets will help at least balance the losses on the international side. Like I said, like people like Cathay, like Singapore have much more international heavy presence, and that's going to obviously hurt them. And that's something that's obviously not in their control, but it will hurt them at least for now. It was actually quite an advantage actually in the previous pre-COVID days, but this is turned around on them. So those are kind of the things I would say what will happen. Well, and all of this is going to be driven by financing. The question is, what will the banks do? And that's the kind of the question mark in my mind, because depending on the way the banks kind of operate, this will have all sorts of different effects on the airlines as well as all the other players in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
What you have seen so far is banks have been generally amenable to amending or restructuring pushing out the debts,
Rent holidays, etc.
Rent holidays, and I put banks in the sense of senior secured banks, and of course their ancillaries, which is the aircraft leasing side, aircraft finance players as well, because they also get debt as well from the same players generally. So if the banks kind of move in and say we're going to pull the plug, then that will have ramifications throughout the entire industry, both from a lessor standpoint as well as obviously the end user, which is the airline's point of view. So this to me is this is the big question, and it's been pretty much, if you think about it, if you start January, it's pretty much been a year. So end of year is coming. Question is, will this have to be solidified instead of being temporary impairments, temporary actions? Is this going to be a more permanent impairment? Is this going to have to take write-downs, and is this going to force basically repossessions and other restructurings? So that to me is actually one of the biggest drivers that might occur.
Okay, you got a big log jam. You got a big log jam. Credits are all pretty well suck right now. Everybody's leveraged to the hilt. Everybody's got their airplanes leveraged to the hilt, and there's really no buyers. So how bad do lease rates, or how bad do values fall? I mean, your crystal ball here, how bad do values get? At least, the lessors ultimately have to put, they're going to have to write down some stuff on their balance sheet to, reflect actual, asset values. So that's not going to be pretty. So is it, what's your thought on all, what's that all going to look like in 6 months or a year?
Well, let me just make one comment. There are buyers out there. I think there's a big difference between the bid-ask spread at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. So buyers are distressed. Buyers are looking for deals. Sellers are trying to keep their shirts. How's that?
Right, exactly. So what you're seeing is basically a lot of people, the sellers are just keeping the old pricing, is what you're seeing pre-COVID days, and things has changed. The picture has changed drastically. So I think this is the dance between buyers and sellers, right? Of how that's going to happen, and at the moment, I think this is where I was saying earlier, the financing picture is going to be a major driver of this kind of dance. How fast it happens. Is it going to be a slow lag period, or is it going to be a much more faster kind of a change, right, in perception? But at the moment, I would say this is actually falling, just like just touching on my book. What I've done is a 20-year residual study of aircraft, all different various types. And what you see is lots of lag that's built in after big shocks. Right. And looking at like great financial crisis and others, you do see this like long lag period, basically 1 to 2 years out, depending on the types. So this is not abnormal, I would say, today where we are. We're only what I would say, if you say March, then we're 9 months in. So
Right.
it's not abnormal, I would say. It's still in line. But the question is this change going to be different? Yeah, there's a lot of different change differences between other kind of exogenous shock periods, and I've written quite a lot about that, those differences. But my point is I think people's perception needs to change in order to get it. But most people are still in the mind frame of let's wait and see, given that people are waiting. But one thing I would say is these aircraft are still depreciating assets at the end of the day. So if you wait, there might be not, if you wait 1 year, 2 years, there might not be great opportunities for people to kind of recoup their cost, their capital from that perspective. So their investments or make their certain returns that they were expecting. So this is one big caveat to keep in mind. So pushing it out might not actually be helpful in asset preservation and price preservation.
So do leasing companies, you got some publicly traded leasing companies out there, Air Lease, AirCap, a couple others. Do they need to start looking at their inventory and go, what are these things? Do we need to, is it better just to come out and start to tell, hey, their shareholders, hey, we're going to start writing this stuff down, and pray, we'll write it down to where we think it needs to be. And we're going to take the hickey now, or do you think that they just hang on and, once again, it's a waiting game?
Okay, so there's a dance between the auditors and the company, right, about what is actually impairment, right? And you can see they're starting to take impairments. Aircraft took close to $1 billion of impairments already. And look, based on their portfolio, that's very, very little in my mind. So the question is, hey, how much more is there to come? And how fast is it going to come? Those are kind of the two questions, right?
Right.
So look, I expect more impairments to come, and given the situation, unless everything kind of comes up, and we were talking about earlier about the vaccines and how fast that will get distributed and disseminated and being effective.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at NorthstarESG.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.